Salvete omnes, and welcome back to another video here on ScholaLatinae. I'm Joe Giambrone, and this is the basics of Latin grammar. So let's jump right in. We're going to talk about parts of speech first, and a word's part of speech is kind of the function that it has in a sentence. But it's helpful, especially with a highly inflected language like Latin, to know what each word is actually doing in that sentence. And so to start us off, we have nouns. And nouns, as you might have learned, a noun can be a person, place, or thing, or idea. So for example, we have Caesar and Roma, and domus and virtus as all of our, for example, nouns here. And nouns in a sentence are the things that are often doing the action or receiving the action. And to put a little more flavor on our nouns, we have adjectives, and adjectives describe nouns. Generally, it's some sort of quality. However, adjectives also include participles, and participles are what are known as verbal adjectives. So you see, the normal adjectives, we have like bonus, good, and fortis, strong. Our participle creatus having been created, you can see that it's related to the verb to create in some way, right? It has to be. In fact, participles being verbal adjectives have properties of adjectives, like they modify nouns, but also properties of verbs, such as they can take objects, right, like a verb could. We'll talk more about this in a different video. Pronouns take the place of nouns in sentences with words like he and who and we when you want to distinguish a certain noun without explicitly naming it again, as that can get quite cumbersome. And then verbs are really the kernels of sentences. You'd be very hard pressed to find a sentence without a verb in it. And verbs are simply just assertions or actions, right? So like sum, I am, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, right? Or amat, meaning he loves, and in this case the am and the loves are the verbs. So I have a little graphic to show you. Here we have Caesar. Caesar is a noun, of course, right? Oh, look at this. Caesar is strong. It's quite the adjective there. And he loves, look at that verb, you. Caesar is strong and he loves you. Those are our first four parts of speech. Our next four, starting off, we have adverbs, and adverbs are similar to adjectives in that they describe things. However, they mainly describe verbs, as the name suggests, but also adjectives and other adverbs, generally in the manner, but also time and place that something is happening. So you could say something is happening splendide, which is gloriously, or that, I went to lunch today with friends, hodie. We have prepositions which show often physical relations between a noun and some other words. So you can be going per agros through the fields, or if you have a dollar bill on you, you might see a pluribus unum, out of many one. Conjunctions, Schoolhouse Rock fans will remember conjunction junction. What's your function? The answer is connecting words and phrases within a sentence. So for example, et meaning and sed meaning but are conjunctions, as they can connect two different thoughts. And finally, we have interjections, which again, Schoolhouse Rock classic, and interjections are simply exclamations. For example, I could say "eheu," which means alas, or just "oh," which means oh. And so again, here's a fun little graphic. Look at that. We are going through the fields. Oh, but we got a little sparkle, got a little shimmer, which means we're going gloriously. And alas, perhaps we stubbed our toe on a grain of wheat or something. Syntax is the way that words fit together within a sentence to produce a logically and grammatically correct sentence. So in English, right, we mainly have what's known as SVO, or subject, verb, object, word order. So if we had the sentence, the dog eats the food, that makes sense. The dog is the subject, it's doing the action. The verb eats is the action, and the food is the direct object, it's receiving that action. However, if I said food that eats dog what? That means absolutely nothing, quite the blunder. And so notice that in English, our word order is a lot more rigid. However, Latin doesn't have this issue as much. It primarily uses subject, object, verb. So the equivalent sentence in Latin would be canis cibum edit, which literally is dog food eats. But It can also be any of these other forms. These are all A-OK. And really, which form you, or rather, which arrangement you want to use, a lot of it comes down to emphasis. So, for example, if you know that your dog is chewing on something, and your friend goes, "What is the dog eating?" But you're not sure if it's like the food or a shoe or something, right? But you look and you say, "Oh, kibum canis edit, sorry," and notice that that's really emphasizing the kibum there is the first word. And like I mentioned, Latin is a very heavily inflected language. We have two kinds of inflection. First is declension, which is used for nouns, adjectives, including participles, and pronouns. They in declension, something is declined. That is the verb there. Gender, number, and case, which you can remember GNC, not the car company. I made that mistake for far too long in my Latin career. G and C are the three things that they are declined according to. And you can notice, as an example, our declension charts for stella, which means star, and bonus, which means good. The other kind of inflection is conjugation. Conjugations are just for verbs, however, they are conjugated according to a lot more things, including person, number, tense, voice, and mood. And you can notice uh, some conjugations here. It can look a little scary, but don't worry. We'll talk through them. As I mentioned gender, and we're looking at grammatical gender here, and Latin has three grammatical genders, which do not necessarily line up with non-grammatical gender, right? Real world gender. Our first one is masculine, and of course, masculine male beings are masculine, like pater, father, is a male being. So often rivers and winds and months and mountains. Our second gender is feminine, which of course female beings are feminine, like mater, mother. Also cities and countries and plants and trees and gems and qualities. So cities and countries you see like Roma and Italia, right? Rome and Italy. Abstract qualities are like virtus that we saw on the first parts of speech slide, where that's virtue. It's the abstract quality. It's feminine. And then the Latin word neuter or neuter means neither. They are neither masculine nor feminine. And so indeclinable nouns, which means nouns that cannot decline, like often nihil does not decline, means nothing. Those are neuter, as well as some other niche cases. There's also something known as common gender, which is either masculine or feminine, depends on the thing itself. For example, bos can mean cow, but in context can mean a bull, which is a male cow, or a heifer, which is a female cow. And of course, there are no really strict rules about this. You will often just kind of learn a word with its gender. For example, we have three different words, exercitus, acies, and agmen, which all mean army, but are all three different genders. And so this is just something that you will come to learn as you keep studying Latin. And we mentioned cases as well. We're going to use stella as our example here. Stella means star, and we have its dictionary entry, stella stellae, right here. The nominative, and we have the singular and plural forms, by the way. The nominative used as the subject of the sentence. The genitive is used for possession, so you say like of the star or the stars. This form is how you find the stem. So you take off the genitive ending, which is ae, and you're left with stel, which is the stem. Our dative is two or four often with verbs of giving, showing, telling is the indirect object. You might notice already that stellae is repeated in three different forms. It seems like it would be confusing when you're trying to read Latin literature. Don't worry, it's not. Context is key. Accusative is just the direct object that receives the action. Ablative is kind of a mishmash of cases. There's originally three cases. It's literally three cases in a trench coat, which is why it can be translated so many different ways. Usually you'll have a preposition to help you out there. Vocative is when you are trying to say, yo, star, and directly address that noun. And then locative is only used for a couple words, and that is used to just say place where. Oftentimes words will just use the ablative for that though. So the way I remember the order of cases, no good dad accuses apples. You will see the first five cases at least in that order in pretty much any Latin textbook you look at. And then we have an example sentence here with a student is nominative here. It's the subject. The book is the direct object. That's librum. But you see it's the book of the teacher. That's possessive. So that's genitive, magistri. and we're giving it to the mother, dadet matri, that's dative there. Who sat with his father, that is our ablative cum patre here. At home is one of the rare words that uses the locative, so we can say domi. And then she says, hi son, salve fili. Fili is the vocative here. And then GNC I mentioned because nouns and adjectives have to agree in GNC. We notice if I said the good star is bright, well, in this case, star is nominative, it's a subject, and it's singular. There's only one, and we know star is feminine, so we have to use the nominative singular feminine of good, which is bona. Stella bona est candida. And you can see that in this case, we make that accusative, stellam bonam. And here it is actually, I'll show you the case forms for bellum, which means more. This is now neuter ablative singular, so it needs to be bono. And then here is masculine genitive singular, Pompei boni. And then the verb, here we have what are called the four principal parts of our verb, amo, amare, amavi, amatus, and they each are used accordingly to tell us how to form different forms of this verb. And so, like I mentioned, the verbs are conjugated according to a couple of different things. There's person, which is who is doing it. Is it I? Is it you? Is it someone who is not in our conversation? How many people is that, right? Is either singular or plural. And then our tense, there's three present system tenses, which are incomplete actions. So we have present is happening now, imperfect was happening, and future will happen. And then our three perfect system, which means they're completed. There's perfect has happened, pluperfect had happened before that, and future perfect will have happened before something else will. Voice just means whether you are actively doing something or you are passively receiving an action. Mood, mostly you're not going to have to worry about this when you're starting off Latin. Indicative is what you're going to see most often. It's just direct speech. I love, you love, etc. Imperative is if you want to order someone to do something, love. And then subjunctive is used for like, if only we should love, and hypothetical things. You're not going to hear about that for a little while at least. There's also the infinitive, which is actually that second form of the verb is the present active infinitive. Infinitives don't have persons or numbers. They are quite the pure form of the verb. And so, for example, amare just means to love. But they're used, amare is used to find the present stem and conjugate in the present system. And with that, that's that. That is those are the basics of Latin grammar, I should say. And thank you all for being here on this episode of ScholaLatinae. I have my background here. And take care. Valete omnes. And I hope to see you in another video.